What's up, everyone? This is Ryan with From Corners Unknown. I hope you're all doing well. Just a couple weeks ago, I had the pleasure of speaking with Cramb. He is an experimental electronica downtempo musician based in Wichita, Kansas, and his project is named the Coma Calling. He also is the owner of Ash and Dust Studio. You may be aware of Ash and Dust Studio as I've been kind of sprinkling that name across the bottom of my artist conversations, maybe the last 20 episodes or so, as he's been the main person helping me master and really improve the audio quality of these artist conversations. I learned of his work, both his music and his studio work, through Andrew Stevens, an ambient composer who goes by Scattered Lodges, who I've also interviewed in the past on the site as well. And I thought this conversation would be a nice way to explore the work that Kyle has produced and also learn a bit more about his expertise in audio engineering and mastering. He recently dropped a new album titled The Howling Family, and in this conversation, Kyle and I discuss this album at pretty decent length, and we also go back to the origin of the project and how it's evolved over time, and kind of discuss how he tells stories with his compositions despite there being no words. And we just kind of get into some of the ideas and thoughts and sentiments he communicates through his music. I should note that Kyle's music does not necessarily fall within the confines of what you'd expect me to cover on From Corners Unknown. His music is much more beat-driven and much more electronic than you would typically expect, but I found this to be a really nice excursion and an interesting way to broaden the scope of what From Corners Unknown can cover. So I hope you enjoyed this little excursion I take in this episode as I learn more about electronic music. Just after this introduction, I will play for you folks one of his tracks titled For Rosemary off of his release titled As the Tree Slept. And to close this conversation, I will play a track off his latest album titled Yesterday. As always, thank you so much for your continued support, and thank you for any and all support you can give Kyle and the Coma Calling. So your main project is the Coma Calling. Do you have? Maybe I discussed this with you in the past, but did you have any project? You had that project Ills with Andrew. Did you have projects preceding this, and like where'd you start kind of getting into music production? Maybe that's the best place to start. Like
my father actually played guitar in front of me for the first 10 years of my life, along with my brother.
Okay.
My dad was really into, Led Zeppelin, the basic dad.
Sure.
White dad music.
Right.
Led Zeppelin, the Beatles,
right.
Stuff like that. So I was always exposed to that stuff. That's why I really, really like pop music structure, like verse, chorus, blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
Get it done in 4 minutes. But anyway, my brother was really into progressive rock, and I can't tell you how much Dream Theater and Van Halen and just like,
right.
How much of that I had to listen to growing up.
Sure.
So then I started playing guitar probably when I was 13, and started playing with this kid that became one of my best friends. He played all sorts of instruments, and so we just started doing things from there. And then I actually got into music production because my dad bought me Sonic Foundry Acid 2, I think was what I learned on. Okay. And so it's a whole bunch of this stuff where you could record loops. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, holy shit, like I just figured out how I can make all the pop music that I fucking love.
Right,
Not
right.
Pop music like Britney Spears, but pop music like being just music that's not jazz or classical.
Sure.
So I didn't know anything about electronic production at all. And the first album that I heard that really, really stuck with me was probably Pretty Hate Machine by Nine Inch Nails.
Yeah.
And, because I heard it and it was just like, oh my God, how is this fucking made?
Right.
So 10 years later, like I'm learning this and like figuring it out. So that's basically how I got into recording myself. And, I used to hang out with a lot of kids that had a lot of very unstructured lives and unreliable schedules.
Right.
So, right. I mean, like, I got to the point to where I was sick of relying on this drummer that I can't expect to, want to perform when I want to. And so then I just kind of stopped relying on rock music in general and I continued to play guitar and compose on it.
Right.
I gave up the sound because there was more interesting things going on, especially around the year 2000. I mean, most of the rock music that I listen to, it's like with, I'm sure this is cliche to you, but like with Radiohead, I mean, they were probably one of the most important bands to me ever. Okay. They started to experiment a lot towards the year 2000, and then was introduced to a lot of things, that kind of altered my perception on music.
Sure.
And became more interested in more electronic leaning things, Bjork and Tortoise.
Sure.
Things that really utilized other sounds rather than guitar, bass, and drums. And so I moved away from all of that,
Right.
So, like that stuff is still in a lot of the music that I write today. Okay. I don't know if you can hear it or not.
Did you have electronic-based projects preceding this one that you were kind of that you were pouring out, or were you just?
At the time of being probably 16, I had this project called Mammoth, which was a kind of like, I don't know, heavier trip hop thing.
What, like, was the beat more driving or like kicking or something, or like
dirtier,
Okay.
Very, very much influenced by DJ Shadow and Portishead.
Right.
Kind of darker, like not upbeat and
sure.
happy.
Sure. Okay.
But that's actually the basis of what came out with Ills. I mean, Ills
Yes.
was basically a product of me ignoring that kind of music for so long and focusing on the Coma Calling, and then just deciding, hey, I want to do something different. Which actually, when I brought it to Andrew's attention that I wanted to work on something with him, I was much more interested in doing something that was reminiscent of big beats from the late 90s.
Oh, okay.
Something that was, more like Chemical Brothers, Prodigy.
Okay.
Stuff.
Yeah, I'm not
making it at all.
right. Like I know Chemical Brothers, but like I think you're one of the first people or persons I've spoken with that like don't really fall in, say, like the dark ambient or metal paradigm, at least in my conversations.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So like,
Yeah.
and I know some stuff about electronic music, but I'm so out of, like, I do really like Portishead. And I
Oh, you do? Okay.
Oh yeah. Like I got into Portishead in such a weird way. I was like saw, Dillinger Escape Plan, the band, the Dillinger Escape Plan. Yeah, there was like a band photo, and the lead singer was wearing a Portishead shirt. And I'm like, who the fuck is that? And then I listened, and then I'm like, that's how I got into them. And I started listening. I'm like, oh, this stuff is really fucking awesome. And like, I started kind of going down that trip hop route, but I never enriched myself.
It's not very
enough.
Deep.
No,
like trip hop. I mean, it came and went.
Yeah.
Really, really fast. And
what would you say is like the time frame it existed in? Like, when was it? Like the years, like when did it ebb?
The big peak for it was basically like in between 96 and probably 98.
Wow, it was that short, huh?
Yeah, a lot of it comes from Bristol, England. That's in regards to Tricky, Portishead, Massive Attack.
Yes.
Those are like the three really, really big ones. But Tricky also worked with Bjork, and the electronic world is basically just all interconnected somewhat, but there's not a big sound of a scene or anything. Same with here. I mean, there's other electronic artists that live in town.
Right.
Nothing like my music.
Really?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's people that do live looping with their acoustic guitars.
Right.
There's people that, rely solely on setting up a laptop and pressing play.
Yeah. Yeah.
And going back to me not being able to do anything live, I mean, I don't feel like it would be much of a show because I come from that rock background where you are watching energy, being exuded,
Sure. Yeah.
Even with like 9 Inch Nails during the downward spiral, like with their tour, I mean, that's probably their best album, and from my perspective.
Sure.
A lot of that, they were actually doing things on stage. The music was noisy as hell.
Right.
It was interesting. It wasn't just like, this is background music. So that's also why I don't want to do it. I want to create things that are more for a listener's experience of just sitting at home and hearing something.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Could you just discuss like how the project like originated and like kind of the name that you chose for it, like what compelled you to kind of begin this endeavor?
2006 was when I actually came up with the Coma Calling as being a thing.
Okay.
It got that name purely because I had a joke with a friend who was a fellow drug user.
I see.
The Coma Calling was basically a joke that we had in reference to kind of poisoning yourself into a drug-induced coma.
I see. I see.
And we always recorded when we were severely
impaired or just
Okay. Well, because for us that seemed to be when the most interesting stuff would come out.
I see.
Was something that we were interested in exploring.
Interesting. Okay.
We were 22 at the time, just being dumbasses,
Sure.
and so that was a joke of ours, and so I just kind of ran with it. Unfortunately, that name kind of haunts me now because pretty much got my life together now.
Yes.
And
now it's just kind of lingering over you. It's just like, oh, you're putting out another album. It's just like, that name is still there, or
that time period is always going to have a severe impact.
I see.
On my life.
Okay.
It's definitely when I kind of saw the darkest side of myself and actually dealt with it. And it is important to me. I mean, it is the basis on which I kind of stopped relying on writing music on guitar and just being boring.
Sure.
Or at least what was boring to me at the time.
Sure.
Which is huge now. Like in Wichita, indie rock is huge.
Is it?
Yeah, so I could have just kind of avoided doing harmful things to myself,
right.
And came out the other side and probably been more successful. So.
Right. What I find interesting in how you discuss it on your Facebook posts and such, you expressly say it's hard for you to transmit stories to people. I mean, you can, but it's difficult when you have no vocals, no lyrics, and it's purely instrumental. But trying to find a way, or trying to formulate a composition to get the emotion across to somebody and hoping that they kind of can relate or understand what you're communicating to them. I'm just trying to...
Well, I feel like a lot of people will come to their own conclusions. Mm-hmm. And with this, that's perfectly fine. But there were quite a bit of stories that actually led into, even sound design on a lot of things. I mean, something that I became really, really interested in was something I experienced. I had this girlfriend back in college who actually went to WSU, which is it's a larger state university locally.
Okay.
She was a music major, piano and drum major. And I would actually go up and see her in evenings when she'd be practicing.
Right.
There's this thing called the practice hall there where you've got students that'll go into separate rooms and practice whatever they're doing.
Right.
Well, when I would go and see her, I would walk down this hallway and sometimes experience these things where you've got a person playing violin over here and a person playing piano over here. And eventually their melodies would kind of fold upon themselves,
right, and
create something for just a split second. That was very interesting. And so I've always kind of been interested in sound collage, if you could call it that.
Yeah.
That's why I can't say that beyond the melodies all having a central kind of writership behind them.
Right.
I always try to include different instrumentation, different sounds, because as a listener of music, I love music, but that's one of the most interesting things to me in electronic music is when you can just say fuck it and you have the world, you can use any sounds that you want.
Totally.
Anymore with the tools that we have. I mean, we can use your fridge that you just unplugged. I mean,
exactly.
That could be musical in the end. And so that was something that I kind of got into is just kind of collaging with sound. And whether it came out good or not, I'm not sure. Basically, this last album has taken a good 5 years. Started it back in 2013, then ended up working on Ills, Evasive Flowers album, my own remix and remastered albums. Worked on that rap album of Hippie with the Dookie Chain, which I basically did vocal production on, which I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. It's way different. Worked on that on a rock album with a local guitarist, which has gone through multiple re-recording phases. We'll see if that ever comes out.
Yeah, definitely.
But eventually, it just got to the point where Andrew was kind of giving me shit all the time about, putting something out.
Yeah, I remember he and I were exchanging some emails about that, and he was just like, "Yeah, I just want to release this thing," and it's just because I get the impression. And we don't have to go on this too long, but I think we've exchanged words about this before. You've mentioned you're pretty OCD about really getting stuff precise, right? You can work a song for maybe days or weeks just trying to get all the sounds and levels perfect. Is that right? Or like you can just take a while kind of like making sure it's as good as you can get it before you release it?
Mono compatibility is pretty important because of the use of people using cell phones to listen to music.
Okay.
So there's a lot of technical aspects in which are massive headaches.
Okay.
Especially for me just trying to liberally kind of use whatever as musical sound sources.
Okay.
Once you record that in and take it out of stereo into mono, there's a huge possibility that you're going to lose a lot of the signal. And so you kind of have to massage a lot of things into place, and it just takes a long time.
Okay.
And yeah, with me being OCD with music, like I do a lot of cleanup and shit like that.
Sure.
Especially with like how I've been talking about with the sound collage aspect.
Right.
When I'm not using just a mono signal from a guitar, it becomes a problem.
Right.
And so I'm kind of creating problems for myself to fix with a lot of the compositions.
Yeah, but you seem to be pretty goddamn like you're like really precise about a lot of this stuff, because I mean we discuss stuff, and I don't even know if I've spoken with an artist that really focuses so heavily on like making sure like just like all like, because we've had conversations about like, oh, you have to optimize it for certain platforms because the way they kind of compress the sound or the way the sound changes, and it seems like you're really in tune with, you know, each component, or like you know how to remix something so it fits each distinct platform.
I feel like
I don't know if that's
I feel like a lot of that comes from the fact that I've put out multiple things in the past.
Right.
Because of Andrew, like yes. saying like, oh yeah, this is really good. You should put it out. You should put it out right now. Put it out right now. And so I've kind of hastily put things out in the past, kind of listened back on friends' speakers and such, and it's just like, oh, that sounds like dog shit. Like, and so I've spent years kind of teaching myself how to do production work appropriately. Right. To where it sounds good. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with The Fragile by Nine Inch Nails, but it's this big epic album that's it uses all sorts of sound sources, but it sounds really fucking good. Okay. And he spent a good 6 years working on the album. Oh
wow. Okay.
But overall, everything sounds really, really great. A lot of his songwriting on the album is not good.
Oh, so he got a lot of the technical stuff down, but like the composition, you're just like, oh, what the heck is this? Or it's just really not that engaging.
Yeah. Same thing with my music. I mean, like I kind of feel like I second guess myself a lot because I am worrying about the technical aspects a lot. Yeah, I've kind of been focusing on doing production work for other people, just to kind of hone the craft, I guess, and it's something that I worry about because you know, you never know if somebody's going to be listening on a cell phone. Like the other day, I had a friend hit me up on Facebook saying like, oh, I'm playing your new album on the overhead speakers at work. Making all of his coworkers listen to it. Oh. It's just like, why are you playing it on overhead speakers? God damn it. Because those are mono. Like, there's no stereo signal. Oh. So when it goes through, it becomes mono in the goddamn speaker. Right. So it's only transmitting, you know, half of the sound that should be there. And it's...
Well, but see, the thing is, what I find a little... I don't want to say comical, but I find it kind of amusing is that it sounds like you're very self-conscious about this, but I'm sure most people don't give a shit, right? I mean, I wouldn't think.
Maybe they don't. I'm not really sure.
I don't know.
I feel like putting your best foot forward when you're presenting something to the world is probably the best thing you can do.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
When people hear something for the first time, I've noticed that quality is super important. Yeah. If something sounds like dog shit on your demo, yes, and it sounds like a demo, most likely people aren't going to come back and listen to it.
Right. But you don't have, I mean, demos can sometimes be pretty shitty, right? Like they could be...
I have shitty demos, yes. Yeah. I have some of the worst demos.
I doubt that.
That's why I push myself to this level. And yeah, it is kind of comical.
I'm not trying to like poke fun at it. It's just like when I talk to some folks about like some of my friends, the few friends I have about music, you know, like like sometimes people seem to be very anal retentive about like the way it sounds, but like most times people will listen to it on their like just like earbuds, and it's like that's like I always listen to music on headphones, or I try to, and people listen to your earbuds, like just think of how much quality you're losing, but nobody, like a lot of people just don't seem to give a shit. So it's just like, I don't know, like
yeah, but you know, anymore you can make a really, really good sounding recording without putting a whole bunch of money into it. Sure. Which is something that, you know, that I've tried to do my entire life, is learn how to record myself, learn how to do all of the technical production stuff myself.
Right.
And try and do it on a cheap budget, because there's no way that, you know, I can afford to go to a local studio and dick around with like whatever sound sources trying to get interesting sounds out. I mean, right. And so like that's something that I taught myself, that you know, like try and make it sound as good as you can. Like, I mean, shit, off.
Yeah, you know? And I hope you're not like being I don't want you to be like, because like we've been talking a decent bit, I don't want you to be like, oh, like the things I produce, because like when I listen to the Howling Family, I'm like, I mean, there's like a lot of density in that thing, man. Like I know, and I like real, I mean, it's hard for me to compare to so many other artists because I don't listen to much of this kind of music, but sure. I mean, like all the different layers and like the density of the beats, and then some of like the way stuff is mixed, like it all just is so enriching and so deep. So whenever you talk about the stuff, it's just like, oh man, I hope you don't feel like the stuff you're putting out is like, oh yeah, like I don't know. I think the quality of everything you've been putting out is great. I mean, I think so.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah, no, and I'm not trying to like, I don't know, just based on the way you're talking, it sounds like you're just like, yeah, like this is kind of like, because you spent so much time on it, and it's very evident, I think.
Okay, well, good. Yeah, I kind of wonder about that sometimes, so, you know.
Yeah, and do you ever get much like feedback or insights or remarks about, because, you know, I know like the digital age of music, it's so hard to really get noticed or get traction in some cases. So, like, how has that been for you? Like, do you get a lot of reception, or is it kind of...
Because of the genre locally, like, it's been pretty impossible to push anything. Especially since I can't play, or I could play shows, but I choose not to play shows because it would be a very limited looking production, or it would be too extravagant for one person to take on. Right. It's hard to get traction locally. Mm-hmm. I also said, I mean, like, indie rock is really, really big here right now. Yeah. Which is a shock, because, I mean, indie rock kind of died to me back in 2005, I think. Sure. Yeah. But, you know, like that's my own perception on things. Like, you know, because I thought that Death Cab for Cutie was shit and stopped listening to it, doesn't mean everybody else did. So. Right. I do get feedback from some folks, but I mean, a lot of people don't listen to this style of music locally. Okay. A main focus for electronic music is basically over in Berlin or England or New York or Los Angeles. So it is hard to find those individuals that actually like it. But those that do locally, I mean, like they've been very supportive. They're always like, you know, patting me on the back and like, expressing that I should not give this music away for free, which is something that I used to do all the time. So I mean, like, it's interesting. It's a hobby for me. Like, I'm not trying to do anything with it. I'm much more interested in actually doing production for other people. Right. And you have I guess we could go into that a tiny bit. I still want to talk some more about the album, but you have the Ash and Dust studio, right? That's kind of your... Yeah, it's just a home studio. You know, like I've mainly been focusing on taking other people's recordings, because anybody can record anymore, and actually cleaning them up, getting them appropriate. I think that's somewhere where I can actually take that OCD side of audio and kind of focus it in on that. Right. Plus, it's a nice source of additional income. Right. Which is nice. People seem to trust me with things. So that's good, I mean, and that's mainly where I've been focusing things for, I'd say, the past 3 years.
Oh, okay. So you've been doing this, and how? Like, what's the level of output, or like the frequency with which you work with artists? Like, are you like constantly kind of working on stuff, or is it like pretty scattered?
Yeah.
Okay.
Some of it doesn't get credited, which is kind of, a pain
Really?
in the ass. But
Oh.
yeah. But if they're paying me, I don't care.
Right. Yeah,
Like,
but I mean,
it's perfectly fine.
anything to get your name out there, though, right? I mean, I would hope. I mean,
yeah,
it is what it is.
I guess.
Yeah.
I think I know enough people that they know what I can offer them, and that's perfectly fine. So, I mean, I am almost to the point of being kind of overwhelmed with work.
Really?
Constantly.
And this is in addition to your just day job and all that stuff too, like just everything. Okay.
So I mean, like, it's plus I'm getting married
Right.
in 5 months, and so planning for that, and I just painted my entire house.
Oh shit. Okay.
So having time for doing audio work is even, it's slim, especially starting a family and getting things all together. Like, like I don't want to get too much more work.
Yeah. But you're focusing, and like, are you, when you do this production work, you're pretty, like, you work, I mean, based on what you described a bit earlier, like, it sounds like you're kind of dabbling in a bunch of different genres. Like, you're not really honing in on one specific thing, right? Like, you're kind of open to messing around and trying to get the best sound out of different genres and learn what you can from them.
I'm pretty picky about the artists that I'm willing to work with.
Okay.
If they don't bring something to the table that I'm interested in working on, like, I'm just gonna kind of
no grind.
say
no grindcore, no black metal, none of that good stuff.
If they're good enough, like, I would love to work on them. I mean, that's the thing. If someone is a good artist and whatever they're doing, I mean, like, I'll focus on their work. Sure. But that's the thing. I mean, it is a big focus and a something to put a lot of time and effort into. Like, I'd rather be working on something good than something that's just
doing it to make some money and be like, oh, I'm just gonna do this and just move on.
Yeah,
like, not really.
The first few guys that actually mastered any music for me, I mean, like I took my project to them and they did the final mastering phase of it. They were doing music for anybody, and like, sure, that's good for making money and such and getting your name out there, but, like, if it's not good quality work, like, I wouldn't want to have my name on it.
Kind of taints it. Yeah. You want to have do you want to have, like, kind of like that repertoire? Like, you just want people to know you're like, oh, you did that, or like you've worked on some good stuff. That makes sense.
Yeah, because there's local guys that will record and just do whatever, and sometimes it's good and a lot of times it's not.
Sure. Okay.
I'd rather work on things of substance than quality over quantity.
What's one of your favorite projects you've worked on, or one that you, like, really wished, maybe one you really loved and then one you didn't think you may have not had the chance to work on, and you ended up being able to work on, if that makes sense? Like did you ever have to, like, fight or, like, really, like, try pretty hard to get something you wanted to work on? If that makes sense.
No. I mean, I've approached individuals, and typically that's how it all started. Was and this leads into one of my favorite things that I've worked on, which was Annie Adams' album, A Vase of Flowers. It's called Ice Queen. Okay. It was a EP that it worked out pretty well for what we were doing, which was very simple loop recordings of her voice, and she actually was okay with me, like, kind of like putting my own creative output into it.
Interesting.
Which I was kind of shocked by. That was probably one of my favorite situations. And also that was when I had just started the Ash and Dust thing too. So that had a lot of magic to it, so. But I haven't really approached anybody recently because I'm kind of overwhelmed, like I said.
That makes sense.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to try and wrap back into your most recent album and try and discuss some of the tracks or talk about some of the stuff, unless you want to go in a different direction. I'm up for whatever you want.
No. The album is what we're here to talk about. So yeah,
and we can talk about that, and I'd also like to talk a bit about kind of that in contrast to the Scattered Lodges split you did, the overlap. Yeah, because I found that to be pretty. I was genuinely surprised to listen to that one, because I was like, oh, like Andrew made me aware of it, and then I listened to it, and like they were just a lot. I mean, they're like ambient, like just like pure, and I found that to be a very interesting, just a different approach to what I've listened to on your previous Coma Calling works, or the stuff you put out thus far.
In regards to overlap, Andrew told me that he was interested in doing a split,
right?
Which initially we had kind of talked about doing like a tape split.
Okay.
Something physical. I think he was very interested in putting out something physical.
Sure.
So we had this idea in mind, and I have so much unused material that I kind of picked 5 tracks that I had kind of lying around, and then decided to focus on them in more of the vein of what Andrew does.
And you try to. So were they like fully developed ideas, or were they like kernels, and you kind of expanded?
They were kernels.
Okay,
kernels.
Cool.
Yeah. And
cool.
So I gave myself like 3 weeks to work on these things. To
all 5, and that was you're just like, okay, 3 weeks. I got to get this all figured out or whatever.
Yeah, because I never really put a time limit on anything. I mean,
okay. Sure.
Because like I've done that in the past where I put a deadline on things. I just end up really, really unhappy with the final product. So
I see.
I kind of felt like getting back in that mode, and so that came at a pretty interesting time, and so we did that, and it's all me kind of focusing my energy on doing ambient stuff, which there's a lot of ambient stuff that happens in my music, but it's usually under layers of other things.
Right. And this is like you just kind of strip all the intricacy out, right? Like all the layering, and you're just like, okay, here's like a raw atmosphere, which I found to be just very interesting, like just in contrast to your other work. And
like I kind of feel like some of the Coma Calling stuff in the past has been really kind of overblown with the amount of ideas that I put into something. Like,
sure,
a lot of people will react more to just general sound design, like I mean, just between 2 notes.
Sure.
I mean, it's plus I'm very interested in film score.
Okay.
And so I was kind of trying to present that, because I've always been interested in that, and kind of like say, okay, this is what I would prefer to see in a film.
Right.
Like, so that's what I was focusing on, was just kind of stripping things back and saying, this is a feeling that I have. Mm-hmm. Here's this. And it came out kind of interesting. I don't know.
No, I like it. No, I think the only issue is I just wish there was more of it. You know what I mean? Like, whenever I listen to I guess that's what the loop button or the repeat button is for. But at the same time, it's just like you kind of, I don't know. I've gotten so deep into like just like loving long ambient songs. Like 25, 30 minute, just like just really long undulating tracks.
There's a big possibility of me actually doing something very similar to what you're actually talking about.
Doing kind of like a lengthy composition, or doing like a
cool. like actually much more in the vein of ambient music. But I've got a few ideas right now that I'm working on with that, and I don't think that overlap is something that is just going to be one volume. I initially, when Andrew was talking about doing this, I kind of proposed that, we do quite a few of these.
And just keep like doing iterations of overlap, or just kind of like making it like a little volume or something like that, or a collection of.
Like maybe one every year for
that'd be cool.
The next 5 months or so.
Right.
So because we're constantly working together on things. He's always done all of my graphic design and artwork.
Right.
He's been one of my best friends since high school.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to be my best man at my wedding.
There
So
you
I
go.
mean, we're constantly bouncing ideas off of each other, and I feel like focusing on doing something like that yearly is it's not only going to be good for our musical output, but it's also good for us as friends to like kind of keep up and such.
Right.
Because like life at 35 is pretty busy. So.
I can't imagine. I'm not there yet, but I'm, maybe in a decade I'll get back to you.
I envy you, man. I envy you. You're at the perfect age. You need to stop. You need to stop talking to old dudes about their music and go out and enjoy life.
Well, how was it? So how was it though, composing those songs for Overlap? Like what was just going the more ambient route? How did it feel just being like, okay, I'm just gonna just strip all this stuff back and just focus on like more raw atmosphere, just like a more engrossing soundscape in a sense. Like how was that? And did you spend a lot of time on these, or was it a little more? Did you just kind of I don't know, like how was it just relative to the usual work you do?
It felt bare. It felt very stripped back and very naked. I was very concerned with sound design for the individual sounds, because I basically did everything within possibly 5 tracks within each song. So each individual sound had to be very precise as to what I wanted, because there ain't no burying it behind anything.
Yes, that's true.
So it's like I had to be really, really confident with the sound, and it was difficult, but at the same time, I mean, it came very natural. It's very unnatural for me to finish a song at that level.
I see.
Usually, if I got a song to that level, I'd be like, okay, let's flesh this out more, because I'm bored of listening to it in this form. But, I have to take the listener's perspective in and say, okay, this is very simplistic. Maybe they'll enjoy that. So
sure. Was it a good learning experience though? Like did you learn more things about yourself as a composer from it, or a producer, or?
I'm not sure. I haven't really thought about it that way, but I suppose I'm kind of learning to take it easy on myself and not overdo things. I mean, that's something that I have never really done before. Was
just chilling and just kind of going about. Yeah. Because usually it's like, okay, I've got this track. I am hearing this melody come from this. A lot of the way that I build a track is I will start with something similar to the ambient tracks that are on Overlap. And then I will use that as a jumping off point. Okay.
I will use those parts, these drones and such, as a pedal, which is just a one note kind of thing that is underneath everything, and then build off of there and go from playing my guitar, coming up with something, playing one of the crappy little toy pianos that I have, and then kind of flesh it out, have drum machines on it, and I go overboard pretty easily.
Yeah, I can say no. I can understand that, especially relative, because when I listen to your other work, I'm like, every time I listen to it, say on the Howling Family, every time I listen back to a track, I'm like, I just keep picking up all these little textures that I didn't hear or catch the first, the listen
That's
prior.
Beautiful. Thank you.
That's what I find so interesting. It's just like, oh shit, there's like a little sample bit, like some sampled thing here, and like I didn't even notice it, and then like it all it just seems to get richer with each listen, which I think is kind of, those are some of my favorite kinds of albums, like when you it has a replayability to it, and you can be like, oh, I can catch these new textures. It's not like, oh, it's just a riff and some drums, and you're like, okay, like it's cool, it's got a nice hook, but like when you have those little details sprinkled throughout, it kind of like makes you want to listen more and absorb it.
Well, and I'm glad to hear that, because all of my favorite albums are like that, like things that actually, that you notice new things throughout every different listen that you have.
Right.
So that's good, but at the same time, with Overlap, it was interesting because I had to take into consideration sound design of these individual sounds
Mm-hmm.
to do the same thing that you're just talking about right now.
Yeah.
I will get bored with just something that's 5 tracks.
Sure.
Know?
That makes sense.
And so I never take into consideration like, oh, maybe the listener would want something that's stripped back. So that's something that I've gotten from the overlap situation. So.
Okay. And how was it, I guess, to speak more, just a little bit about working with Andrew when you were coming up with this? You're like, okay, let's do a split. Were you thinking about a specific concept idea? Like, were you guys like trying to be like, oh, let's match up, like let's kind of like meld minds and kind of come up with something? Or were you like, I'll do my thing, you do your thing, you just see if it kind of converges and it sounds, if it just flows? Like how did you?
We mainly just focused on, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we discussed simple themes and such, but I think that we just went with where we were at individually, emotionally, with what had been going on recently. A lot of his songs they're very beautiful and warm.
Right, yeah.
And I feel like that's a theme that is going on in his life currently.
Mm-hmm.
I actually suffered a loss in the family recently.
Right, okay.
My niece actually drowned.
Oh, fuck. I'm sorry.
About a little less than a year ago.
Wow.
So that's been something that has kind of, I think about her every day. And
right.
So she does come up in the music and the feel of things.
I see.
It's not just the thought of her, but also what my family has gone through.
Sure.
Acceptance of things.
Sure.
If you will.
Yeah.
That has been a theme throughout. So I will take personal experiences and try and put them into my compositions, whether anyone knows about it, that's
yeah. No, I can see how that. Yeah, like, I mean, is there ever, for you as a musician, do you I know you left, or you made that one remark, kind of, you had that sentiment of like, people are going to make their own decisions at the end of the day, or like they'll kind of come to their own conclusions, but do you ever hope people kind of get a certain feeling from it, or like, do you want people to understand kind of where you are at in life at that moment when they listen to your music? Or are you just kind of like, people can just do what they can interpret as they want, and I'm okay with that?
I'm fine with people giving their own meaning to whatever. I mean, if it touches them that
mm-hmm.
much to where they're listening to something and think of a memory or be experiencing something at the time that they are
right.
listening to it, like they can apply that to it as much as they want. That's perfectly fine.
Okay.
I'm basically since it's instrumental music, I'm basically stuck with just a song title to explain what's going on.
Right.
And so like on my Facebook recently, I have been trying to kind of flesh out what I was thinking at the time,
mm-hmm.
what I've been feeling. There's a lot of climate change issues throughout this last album. I don't know if people will actually come to those conclusions by reading the song titles.
Right.
But there's a lot of dread and fear, and I actually experienced a friend that had a very abusive family situation going on, and hence the title The Howling Family. Like it just seemed like the craziest group of individuals I've ever
really okay so. Yeah could you I know it's on your Facebook, could you flesh that out a little? Like, I found that interesting, because when you had the title The Howling Family, I'm like, oh, what is the Howling? And I started like looking stuff up, and I started getting to like family crests, and I was like, I don't know if this is what he was going for.
No.
And then I kind of halted, and then I saw your post. I'm like, oh, okay, I get it.
Well, okay. So when I started composing for this album, like I said, I mean, it was it's a good 5 years back, and I was really, really good friends with this individual who had quite a few family tragedies all happen within 6 months, and seeing them bicker and be emotionally and physically abusive to each other was very hard on my psyche, because I was told by those individuals, you can't tell anybody what's going on. Well,
Really?
I'm no longer, in touch with that person. So,
Right.
but I definitely will never divulge who it is.
Of course.
But it was tough to see, because I come from a very loving, nurturing family, and seeing the depths in which people will actually be just insane to each other, and seeing the kind of the turbulence out of that family was very, very influential to what I was actually making at the time. I know that's a long answer.
No, not at all. I find that very interesting, and just kind of, trying to wrap my head around some of the concepts or some of the songs
There was substance abuse, there was cancer in the family, there was an elderly death of another family member. I mean, like it was really, really negative, and there was a lot of substance abuse in that family, and so that brought out all of the ugliness that all of these people had, and it just they just seemed wild like wolves, and so that's how I just came up with that title. Because that's how I refer to them in my mind. It's like
okay.
Howling Family.
Interesting.
They're just fucking crazy. So
sure, no, that's very interesting. I would have never really picked up on that being kind of the centerpiece or kind of like the overarching.
Well, the individual was very important to my life at the time, and so it was very hard for me to actually experience that and not do anything about it, and I kind of felt powerless in the situation. So. Right. All I had was the ability to kind of output it into my music, because that's how I kind of release stress and discomfort with things, is actually work on music, and that's how I get it out. I mean, it's very therapeutic, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. So when you go about producing a song, because there's so many intricate layers to these songs, like where do you? And I guess you've already spoken about. You kind of start with like an ambient, like you kind of start with a foundation and you kind of use that as a springing off point, but like
a bed.
Yeah, like some bedrock or what have you. But like how does is there like a typical way that songs unfurl when you're like composing stuff? Like how do you usually what mindset are you in when you produce some of this stuff, and like how does it really just kind of cascade for each track? Like, do they just kind of pour out, or is it like you have to meticulously craft each second, or like?
Well, there's two examples from the Howling Family. You've got a track like D Coke, which is all just beat making essentially, and then has more melodic things come in. Which is something that I'll do. I will work with a drum machine or sampling of individual sounds, noises sometimes. And then things, might come out of that. Or I can, sit down and be playing guitar, which happens very rarely anymore, actually. But I will compose something on a guitar and then translate that over to piano or strings,
Sure.
Which, like with strings, like I'm basically stuck with working with MIDI, which I fucking hate. MIDI is the most boring shit on earth.
I couldn't speak to it. I know the name. I've seen it all over the place, but I don't know anything about it. So
it's basically just a language for your computer to understand. Like, oh, I'm pressing a button down. Oh, I'm releasing, like not a button, but a key.
Okay.
And so then it's just boring to use. There's no physicality to it.
Sure.
Everything sounds very static and stale to me in regards to MIDI-based music. So I try and avoid that as much as possible, but adding on layers of sound here and there, I'll get new ideas from that, and eventually, I'm sure these tracks just sound like I threw a bunch of garbage at them.
I mean, to me, they don't. They sound like
assembled them from there.
Right. Well, because there are like certain moments that I just find really cool. Like, I can't remember the name of the track for the life of me. I'm looking at the track list, but I can't fucking put two and two together anymore. But like, there's that one where you're using. It sounds like kind of like like a little sample of like a crowd almost cheering, or like they're kind of like there's like a like
Oh,
or like there are just like
um,
these cool little moments where I'm like, it's just like I always wonder, I'm
that's
like, oh, how did you how did you get that sound bite, and like
kind
how
of Homo sapiens.
right, and I think that there's even some
That's
violent.
actually that's actually just a cymbal rise. Like it's the sound of a cymbal
Oh,
with a lot of distortion on it.
oh,
It actually
interesting.
sounds like a crowd. Like that's what I was going for.
That's
with the sound of it.
Okay.
But I mean, like
Cool.
it was a lot of sound manipulation for that.
Interesting. Okay, see, and that's where I find the music to be really interesting, because when I heard that, I was like, oh, it sounded like you took like a sample from like an old clip or something, and you kind of melded it into the track. But now that you're saying
Okay.
it's sound manipulation, but like that's what's so cool about that. I'm just like, oh,
I'm
I wouldn't.
glad that you caught on to that, because I mean that was essentially me trying to add in like because that track is completely about climate change and how we aren't
Right.
doing anything in regards
Right.
to trying to prepare for this or kind of dampen the effects.
Right, for Mother Gaia to maybe come back and reclaim what's hers or something like that.
No, well, eventually, I mean, from my perspective, I see that possibly happening.
Sure. Oh yeah.
Like, I don't know if you've seen scientific studies recently about the sixth mass extinction.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah, I think I've seen
actual-
a bit about that. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's pretty bad when our entire food chain outside of what we've created with cattle and
Right.
the fish market
Right.
to be collapsing around us and us not doing anything.
Yes.
Well, anyway, that cheering sound was supposed to be like how I feel that we are cheering this on.
Interesting. Okay.
As fossil fuel consumers, we are just bringing this upon ourselves.
I see.
That was actually a completely different way that I did that track. I mean, I had ideas in mind
Mhm.
that I was trying to convey out.
Yeah.
The very tribalistic drum beats in it were
Yeah.
actually supposed to. There's a lot of thought that I put into that track that
Mhm.
probably is going to be impossible to translate to people. But
I mean,
I'm glad that you heard the cheering sound.
No. But they're like, I can't recall if that was in the same track, but there was another bit where there was like some violin, I think, that came in, and it sounded like there were certain bits like they just sounded like they were kind of wrapped in kind of like this. Like it kind of had like this old like recording luster to it, if that makes sense. Like it kind of sounded like it was a little more old timey almost, but not like in a bad way. Like, it just like kind of had that sound, if that makes sense. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
I do. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I mean, you're just smiling and like looking at me. I'm like, oh god, I don't know if I'm.
I'm not going to tell anybody where that's from or how it was created.
Oh, why not?
Just because they're copyright violation.
Okay. I will.
Ills is a project that taught me a lot about actually just sampling
Okay.
all sorts of stuff, and
Okay.
honestly, that album is just made up of old jazz samples, television recordings.
I bet a lot of that old jazz samples, those are probably open source at this point, right? Or they're probably relinquished from any copyright, right?
They have been rolling back copyright laws to where
Yeah,
like
that's-
further and further back to where like you can get in trouble for all sorts of stuff.
Okay, well, we don't have to press
If they're
on.
going to or not, who knows? Like, but at the end of the day, if DJ Shadow is actually worried about like sampling things, like he's actually said like, I'm really worried about losing my home at all hours of the day. Like I'd rather not divulge, where I've got.
That. I just thought it was interesting, just the way it sounded, and like I don't know, like, because it all seems to be like they're kind of, the sounds are kind of siloed off, or like they're kind of like just because they're, I don't know, like the way, like you said, like collage, like the way it all kind of comes together, like they don't always sound like they're recorded in the same space, but like kind of like that separation of like the way they sound, like I don't know, there's such an interesting interplay
I'm glad that you actually hear that, because I feel that a lot of people probably don't, but that's exactly what I was going for.
Right, and that's what I was
So
trying
it's
to get
excellent.
at. Yeah, when you were saying like the string thing, I'm like, or the strings, I was just like, oh, or like the way it sounded like there was a crowd, like it sounded like an old recording of some sort. Like to me, it did.
Yeah,
That's why I
yeah.
was like, oh, I found that inherently compelling. But
Good. No,
yeah.
that's excellent, because that all goes back to that experience that I had at WSU, going through the practice hall and hearing different sounds and wanting to capture that and actually put it out as music.
Right.
Like that's excellent that you caught on to that.
Sure.
I think a lot of people probably think that that's unintentional.
Right, they're like, oh, this guy doesn't know how to mix his sounds. Oh, fuck this guy, or whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
Which, I mean, that's fine. Like I'm fine with people not being okay with it. Like, I'm not trying to appeal to everybody. I'm glad that you caught on to that. Like,
Right. What would you say on your album, your most recent one? What's one of your, like, which one was the most fun to produce, and which one was there one that was like a real thorn in your side, a real pain in the ass to like clean it up and get it sounding the way you wanted to?
the Forever Switch came together in no time. That's my first EP. It came together in no time. That's why I had to go back and remix and remaster it. As far as cleaning up and getting things straight, As the Trees Slept was a massive headache.
Really?
I mean,
okay.
I'm playing instruments on that album that I don't know how to play.
Okay. Sure.
I wrote this melody on this guitar. I'm gonna try and translate it on my dad's fucking violin, and then sample that, and then put some delay on it to where it doesn't sound like pure shit.
Right.
That album, I love the way it sounds. It's great, but that was a pain in the ass. Taking a guitar part and then trying to translate that to playing individual strings on an auto harp is just a fucking headache. It sounds cool. It totally sounds awesome, but I'll never do that again.
Really? Okay.
So I think I didn't explore that to its full potential, but
sure.
I went as far as my sanity will let me.
We'll let you. Okay. Okay.
So in the future, I think I'm just gonna stick to doing more stuff like the Forever Switch.
Right. Okay. And I guess on your most recent album, was there like a song, like if you were to like one that turned out better, or like is there one that you really were surprised by the way it turned out, listening?
With my previous albums, I've always had a favorite track.
Right.
I can't say on this album that I think I spent so much time on it and kind of curating the songs that I'm not really I'm not gonna play favorites with this one. I'm genuinely happy with the 10 songs that ended up on this. And usually I won't feel that way once I'm done with the recording.
There's some where you're kind of I'm like some of them just come off a little weaker, or you just don't really.
I really hate albums that have fucking filler tracks.
I can't stand that shit either.
Yeah, I mean I grew up listening to a lot of Seattle grunge stuff, and I'd always get halfway through the album, and then I would just be like, these fucking 3 songs are boring as shit.
Yeah, you
why are these on here?
Yeah,
and so I kind of feel that this new approach that people are taking with just releasing EPs is much better.
Right.
And you cut the shit out, this is the longest thing that I've done, and I'm happy with all of the tracks.
Okay.
Honestly.
Oh, that's cool. Oh, that's good. And I'm also interested, and I know we can go into some details, a bit of detail on this, but what I found interesting about your album, the Howling Family especially, it's the songs you produce, they kind of have their they have their structure, but you really don't. And I appreciate this a whole hell of a lot that I don't see a lot of people do, but I need to get good at listening to more electronic music. But a lot of your tracks are very succinct and impactful. They don't you don't really draw it out, which I really appreciate. And I wanted to know what your thought process was behind this. you don't sit on a certain beat and you're like, okay, let's just play this for 5 minutes and then just like, you know, because like the opening track is less than 2 minutes, and you know all the subsequent. But I appreciate that. Like there's a succinctness, and there's like I don't know. I'm trying to see like, is there a reason why you prefer, like, do you have a preference for shorter tracks? Like, do you find them to be punchier or more palatable that way, or is it just kind of how you write songs?
Growing up with the Beatles, like, I'm not scared of doing a 2-minute long song.
Sure.
I know a lot of people think that they need to draw out in length a lot of tracks, and that's a problem with me actually, you know, making music for the listener, because a lot of times I'll be making music for myself.
Right.
And saying, okay, this is where my attention span cuts off with this. Like,
sure.
Like this is good enough. Let's call it done at like a minute 52 seconds. Which you know, like I'm not going to bore myself,
right?
Like, you know, because eventually the listener is going to be bored as fuck.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a good thing and a bad thing. Can I produce a long dance track that actually keeps people engaged? Probably not.
Right. No, I just found that to be interesting, just how the songs, because like, you know, I've listened, I guess your music doesn't really fall into like the realm of trip hop per se, but yeah, I've like listened to plenty.
Oh, it does. It definitely does.
I guess
it's
yeah, you use the word downtempo. I'm like, what the fuck is downtempo? And then I like look it up, and I was like, oh, that's a really, I think Wikipedia was like, oh, it's like the beats are earthier. I was like, what the fuck does that even mean? And like,
is that what it says?
Something like that. And I was just like, oh, okay, I guess. Or it was like trip hop is more earthy and downtempo's. I was like, I don't get it.
I don't really know what to call my music, honestly. I mean, it's experimental electronica, but I mean, it's not like I don't feel like it. I don't feel like it's electro. I don't feel like it's synth pop. I don't feel like it's you know, like it is a collage itself of all these things that mean something to me. It's not like I feel like I'm doing anything groundbreaking though.
Oh no, sure.
So,
so where do you see your, like, in the 6 months ish that remain in 2018 and going forward? Like, where you, like, I guess what remains in 2018? What are you setting out to do with your project? Are you aiming to get anything new released, or like what is your near time horizon looking like musically?
You know, I'm working on like more ambient tracks have actually just been pouring out of me recently.
Okay.
So there's that, and then like I'm kind of working on things that are mentally driving and forward focused.
Sure.
Lots of momentum driven music and ambient music, which is strange because they're, you know, so different.
Right.
So that's kind of what I've been doing. I've got some things that I've been throwing around as far as sketches for ills. Whether that actually comes together, we'll see.
That's still a bit on. Is that kind of like on a little hiatus, or is it just kind of you're not really sure where to take the project right now?
Me and Andrew are just so freaking busy anymore. Making schedules mesh at this age. We're both in our mid-30s. I mean, he's got a kid. However, I'm just getting married right now. I've been pretty selfish with most of my 20s and early 30s, but you know, he's got a family now, and just finding time for it is going to be difficult. So I think what we're going to have to do is more of like a Dropbox folder, like band
like
situation.
Here's some stuff, and then you kind of layer stuff on top of it, or like you kind of just like shape it.
Oh, like building ideas, like bouncing them back and forth between each other. We didn't really do that with the last one. What we did was we sat in a room together. We said, okay, how do you like this? And then he would come up with something, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of back and forth, but it was engaging, and we just haven't had time to sit for 6 hours and work on a track, you know? So that may come into fruition. I don't know. I kind of foresee myself focusing more on ambient stuff and the more driving house music stuff. All right, man. Well, I'll talk to you later.
All right. Sounds good, man. Thank you.
See ya.
Take care, man.